Hello, everyone, and welcome to part 2 of our Travelogue series of my little adventure in Europe and the United Kingdom. Today's video, we'll be taking a look at England. This was a United Kingdom cruise. They call it the British Isles, kind of the short term there. And of course, our first stop, of all places, was the lovely Dover. Now, for those of you who've got a handy-dandy map, you can probably take a look and see the fact that Dover is basically right across the way from where we left over in Amsterdam from the previous time. Now, the incredible thing here was I had never been to England before. I was mentioning in the previous video, I had done Italy, which was awesome. And like I said, I did the French Riviera, which was beautiful. I got to dip my hands and, the Mediterranean, experience all that. And this is a successful series. Maybe I'll do a video on that too. But I'd never been to England. Of course, my perception of England before I had actually been here, you see on basically the BBC, or you see Python, or any of those classic movies like the British countryside. I think of Doc Martin, which would theoretically take place in that direction, I believe, if my mental map is accurate. And I just get the perception of quaint little villages. There's like a little pub downtown or something like that. Somebody complaining about the TV inspector van. That was kind of like the stereotype that I kind of got as I was doing it. You see these buildings that you see the stone house on the edge of the wait a minute, there's one right there. The stone house right on the edge of, like those big farmlands and everything like that. Or just hedgerows everywhere. We'll get to hedgerows when we get to Ireland, obviously. And that was my perception. That's what I thought it looked like. So, of course, my wife and I, we decided to take this cruise. Like I said, I wanted to see just what is it all about, kind of a thing like that. And the first thing I saw when I got there looked like this. And there they are, the Cliffs of Dover. The Cliffs of No, it isn't. No, it is the Cliffs of Dover was my introduction to the lovely United Kingdom. And the crazy thing, too, is when I came up on this, you always see photographs, or maybe you're DCS fans or something along those lines. And, you get to see pictures of these things. You're like, look at how cool this is or something like that. Look at just how white they are, kind of a thing like that. But nothing prepares you for just how white these things are, kind of a thing like that. And it was absolutely crazy when we were basically coming up on the ship here. And we had the big ports, and again, taking those pictures, you can see the Dover Castle on the top. And to give you an idea of just a scale of this, these are big 3-story buildings, and this thing is right up. But without going too far into our details here, this whole castle structure is huge. It goes in, and there's openings in the side of the cave. You can see a little bit of that basically hanging out here. And the whole port and everything along those lines that actually existed here, which I thought was really wild. I'll see if I have a picture of that. The whole breakwater and everything along those lines, just kind of integrated into it. But there were stoplights on it. And it's one of those things that oh, why would you have stoplights at a pier kind of a deal? And of course, it makes perfect sense to me now, because obviously the traffic coming in and out is constant. Dover is a very, 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 very busy pier, kind of a thing like that. And another thing I thought that was absolutely wild, by the way, it looks like we have a little bit of a gap underneath the cliffs there, but that's perfectly fine. One of the things I found absolutely wild is all the stuff that you see here, a lot of the stone in it, you would actually see at our next stop when we got to England itself, which of course was over there in Canterbury. There's actually one building that basically was made of this black stone that existed in that region. But another thing you'll probably notice here is I've gone for the Edgeley Optica as the aircraft. Now, if you remember last time, we went along with the Hawk, which was perfect. Canticars, Hawk, they're basically the same kind of scale. The reason I chose this one is this is an English native aircraft. It was originally supposed to be an observation aircraft, and it does have amazing view and everything like that. It is incredible. For those of you who are big VR fans, this thing is absolutely probably one of the best observation aircraft for purposes of VR. One of the reasons I'm not in love with this aircraft, it's a little bit finicky. You have to really kind of fiddle with the engine because, again, it's not constant speed propeller or anything like that. And it's not very quick, as you can see there, looking at our speed. We're doing about 105 knots. And again, we're basically going downhill here. But anyway, as I was saying, we came into Dover. I showed you those photographs. As a matter of fact, let me see that photograph again. Not that I could put them side by side, but if I kind of roll to the left just a little bit here, you can see there just like that. So it makes it pretty clear sort of what we're looking at that particular time. And like I said, really, really neat pier. We were over here on the right side here. This would be the south side, if you kind of general terminology for that. And like I said, there's a bunch of radars on the side, and I'm brand new to this. So I'm taking pictures of things that you don't really need to take pictures of. And of course, we caught a coach, and the purpose of the coach was to take us up the cliffs. And there it is. Look at the castle. Look at the size of that thing. Oh! Through the magic of details. Not bad, not bad. They did a pretty nice job, I think. They did a pretty nice job. And again, it's just absolutely wild. There's like a little helicopter pad up here and everything like that. But anyway, as I was saying earlier, my perception of like what England was kind of a thing. And again, I'm totally fine being wrong about things. It doesn't bother me. That's what I felt. So of course, we take a look at all this stuff, absorb it, kind of a thing. You have to get through these cliffs, by the way. You can't just get through, like, you can't go over them. You can't go into them. So you have to go through, like, basically finding a spot, like a road that would take you up it. That's kind of what we had here. So we're jump on the road, of course. We're proceeding inland here. You can see all the traffic. That's a really cool bridge, by the way. I don't have a good picture of that. And we're starting to rip along here, and we're starting to get the English countryside. And the English countryside, you look through and you just see rolling hills. Lots and lots of rolling hills. And hedgerows, rolling hills, hedgerows, rolling hills, stone houses, and then all of a sudden my wife basically goes and says, why is this place exactly like it looks like on TV? It's one of those things. I'm like, is it because they did it? Oh, by the way, this is a very British invention, something we don't really have much in the United States. That is a lovely roundabout. And the incredible thing is everybody's driving on the wrong. Oh, that guy's got the right direction. We got to see a BMW, by the way, from Germany go down the wrong direction of a roundabout, which I thought was kind of dangerous. But of course, it was a good exercise in making sure the brakes on the bus work, kind of a thing like that. But this rolling countryside, absolutely beautiful. You're cruising along. You got the mountains here. Actually, the Channel Tunnel is very, 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 very close by. We might get a look at that as we kind of sneak over. It is an amazing, amazing thing. We did not get to ride the channel. I just think it's insane that it's basically an underground ferry because you basically drive your car into it, get out, and there's a little lounge and stuff like that. It is just amazing. And I appreciate the fact people are on the left side of the road here. That is good. Some people say left side, right side. One of our tour guides, of course, was very, 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 very particular that there's only one correct side of the road, and that's the left side. And gave us a great demonstration where I got stabbed in the chest. And then I explained to him, that's fine with your sword hand and all, but I'm a lefty. And of course, everybody laughs. And I'm just having fun at the poor tour guide's expense kind of a thing. You know who I am. But again, like we were looking around and we were just amazed. Everything was just so much older. Tesco, by the way, that was the new thing as far as us when we're having those discussions. But there's another rotary, or roundabout, I should say. Rotaries are a little higher speed. I like the guys going the wrong direction there. And we just love these rolling hills. It had like this really amazing country kind of vibe to it. We're really liking the details. The highways have a different system. There's like the A highways, then you have the M, the motorways, and then they're saying, oh, this is a dual carriageway. And then for us, of course, there were the big old fashioned, basically speed cameras everywhere. Where I live, we don't use speed cameras. It's just not a thing. If you're going to speed, which everybody does incredibly in New England, that's just kind of our thing. You just have to risk getting pulled over by a hidden police cop. Certainly, that's just how it is. Here, like, you just get the little camera icon, then you get the camera icon, and then you get the camera icon, and everybody basically goes the same speed. Quite confusingly, the signs they used here basically had a circle with a speed, like, in the middle of it, and that was in miles an hour, even though the rest of Europe, which we left, or when we go in, say, Ireland, is in kilometers per hour. Now, of course, in the States, we have a big square sign that says, 45 miles per hour or something like that. For them, it's just 60. That's the thing. But there's another thing that I found when I was introduced to this area. And again, beautiful views of the countryside here. It's kind of hard to see through the hedgerows and kind of the trees on the side of the road. They do such a good job basically hiding the big roads, kind of a thing like that. But one of the things they have here, which I thought was awesome, and I really wish we would adapt it in the United States, is the stoplights have an extra step in them. When you're cruising around in the stop sign, when you're up at a stoplight and it's red, it goes red, red, yellow, green. And it basically tells you to go ahead and get prepared for the green light. Now, if you're a truck, that gives you a lot of extra time because by the time you're in gear and you start pushing the accelerator, it's turned green, you're on your way. The inside joke, one of the tour guides basically said, I was asking about it. I'm like, we don't have that in the United States. Apparently, this in other places too. Again, things we don't have yet. But the funny thing with that, of course, was either talking about it or whatever. I'm like, what is it really about? And he's like, well, it's really about telling you to get off your cell phone. And I'm like, okay, put your cell phone down when it turns red, yellow, kind of a thing. I really wish we had that in the States. I tried to do some research on it to find out if it actually improves, by the way, another racetrack. Does it actually improve, response time? And did we find that people were able to basically, get off the light faster? You're saving traffic, frustration. And the only thing that I could find in the research about it basically showed that you're less likely to get rear-ended. And I'm sitting there going, what? Basically, it's the guy when the green light turns, everybody hits each other. That's basically what it reduces, and I thought that was pretty wild. Again, like the simple little change, and again, no, it's other side of the road. We got obviously roundabouts instead of stoplights and stop signs. I don't think I saw a single stop sign in England anywhere I went. Actually, they definitely had the giveaway signs, and then you go to Ireland, it becomes yield, and it's just like, well, that's doesn't matter. It's the same sign. I know what you're talking about. But the next part, of course, after we took this nice long journey, was our arrival in Canterbury. Now, Canterbury was a neat spot. I love the fact that you have all this beautiful, beautiful countryside. And I was making comments about Farming Simulator. Like I said, I'm ignorant. I don't know. But literally, it's Farming Simulator with the same equipment, same quality, plus Euro Truck Simulator, all kind of mixed together. I don't know. You could just tell that that's not something I understand well. But the cool thing here was coming to Canterbury. We basically parked at a coach park. And again, they make a very car park. That makes sense. I get what that means. But one of the wild things here, and again, you can see the cathedral coming up in a few seconds here, and I'll talk about that. You also got the opera house and stuff like that. Was there's this little canal, and I don't think I'm going to be able to see the canal from up here. But like when I mean little canal, I'm saying like 25 feet wide, 30 feet wide. And, it's a neat place. Obviously they did some mill work and stuff like that on the canal. But the thing that blew my mind was the fact that there were people in gondolas basically doing tours on the, basically canal. And these are very, very well-rated tours. But it was really weird because, like, it's not a big body of water. Like, it's a little thing. And they're just kind of like bunk, bunk, going like, off the different sides. And the poor guy's got to sit there. But the big attraction, of course, in Canterbury was this incredible cathedral here. I forget how much it was. It was like 15 GBP or something to go in. And it was pretty incredible. What I really, really wish is that I had some pictures of it to kind of give you an idea of it. But unfortunately, I did not. But one of the cool things, of course, is, we were sitting there, we had the cathedral or whatever. My wife, like I said, has got all the good pictures. But you have these houses. And here comes, like, my little, kind of moment. Is the fact that the houses were, again, Tudor age houses. So many, many hundreds of years old. But they had second floors that were very, very, very tiny. So, like, for those who've ever been to Disney World, you had the kind of forced perspective where the top of the building's a little bit smaller. So it looks like it's further away. So it's like, the right size kind of a thing like that. But these look like forced perspective houses. And like the second floors were supposed to be like 5 feet tall. And their windows were so small. Like, I'd be afraid to like touch the house. I'd like crunch something, kind of a thing like that. And of course, me being me, I had to go do a bunch of research. Ask me about the Plantagenet sometime, by the way. I know a little bit about that now. But one of the things, of course, is I was looking that up. I'm like, what's the deal with this? And basically, they built a city and they said, well, more people need to live here, and I'm not going to let you build out. They have something called the Green Belt in Europe, which we don't have as much in the U.S. And also, you can see kind of a little small town kind of a thing there, kind of built in. So they built up, but again, you didn't really have like fancy cranes or anything, so you couldn't build so big. And then glass was really, really expensive. And then when you combine that with something called the window tax, all of a sudden you realize, oh, of course it makes sense. If I'm being charged by the window and the size of the window, I'm not going to make very big windows, but I'm still going to have them if I can have them. So it basically creates this perfect little storm of, that led to these very, very, very small buildings, like I said, kind of a thing like that. So I just thought that was just interesting. We spent a few hours in Canterbury. I got to familiarize myself. Hotel Chocolat, which was like, like for us in the United States, at least where I live, we have something called Bunsen's. If you go on the West Coast, you have something called See's Chocolate. They had the Hotel Chocolat. And of course, we got some mint hot cocoa. And we had this, like, this is going to sound crazy, but it was basically if you imagine kind of a blister pack of chocolate bars, like Kit Kat bar size chocolate bars. And they're called Béton on the front. And I'm just like, okay, I definitely don't know all the lingo here. I got my crisps and my chips and all that all sorted out. Like, that was pretty easy. Again, classic example of just the way everything is designed here, where basically the streets on the outside, you have very, 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 very tiny yards on the inside. And like, again, going back to all those classic shows and seeing all those things and actually be able to see it firsthand, you're like, no, that's actually how people live. And that brings me to another point. And this is going to be kind of an ongoing theme throughout our journeys and all our different places that we're going to visit. And that's the fact that there is a serious housing crisis. Now, for those of you who are European and you've made it this far, hopefully I haven't offended everybody and chased you all away at this point. But many people, and across all the different places I went, were basically explaining how incredibly challenging it is to actually get a house. When I think of, the American dream, again, going back to the States here, you know my bias, you know why I say what I say. But for us, it's a classic. I'm going to have a detached home. It's going to be good size. I'm going to have a little bit of a yard. Here, If you're lucky, you might get a house that's 150 years old, and you might get it attached to 6 more houses next to it, kind of a thing like that. The concept of a country home, again, I'm just looking at the window here. You can see there's no just houses chilling in the woods here. Everybody lives in town. Now, again, coupling that with the better public transit, that's okay because, again, I can just walk downtown, grab the bus or the train, and be on my way, kind of a thing like that. So something that I don't get that where I live. Everything's just, everywhere you look, there's just houses, basically, in every single direction. And that's just kind of how it is. So what we're doing now is, after we visit Canterbury, of course, we got a lovely little trip of the countryside, which is exactly what I'm doing right now. Again, see, this is playing great. You just look out the window, you can just see stuff. But the countryside, absolutely gorgeous. Definitely something. It kind of reminds me of the American West a little bit, kind of a thing like that. Just kind of the way some of it sort of shook out, the general style of everything here. But like I was saying, everything's like town, land. Something that it's just not like that where I live, kind of deal. But what we did do is, after traveling the countryside, we visited a couple of these old villages, and they had some actual thatch roofs, which I thought was absolutely wild. We'll talk about those when we get to our Ireland segment here. And it was really, 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 really cool. Again, countryside, they had these neat roofs. This used to be the basically garden of England, and they used to grow a ton of hops here. It was one of the things that was explained to me. And I thought that was really cool because you had all these buildings with these really funky, basically chimneys, so you could like dry the hops out and stuff like that, or you could like heat them up. And it was all very cool because so much of that stuff is still here. Whereas, again, going back to the United States, we just steamroll it and put up another development, kind of a thing like that. So it's a kind of like this ongoing battle. But our next stop is right off our nose, and that was Leeds Castle. Now, one of the things, again, going back to my wonderful, beautiful wife, we always had discussions about what kind of things do we see when we go to England. So for me, of course, I want to see castles. Like when I was a kid, I love castles. I used to make paper mache castles. And I would get the books in the library, like when you do the Dewey Decimal System, and there's the castle right there, by the way. We'll talk about it when we get closer. But the Dewey Decimal System, you get the castle books all next to each other, and I would just basically loan all of them out because I was so obsessed with the Middle Ages. I had like Middle Ages helmet. I had a sword from a Renaissance festival that I probably broke trying to hit my brother with it. And of course, I was so fascinated with them. So I finally got to see a real life British castle. And that, of course, was a Leeds Castle here, which you can see right off my left as I kind of sneak around here. Now, the crazy thing is, so I go back to my photography here. Again, I do not consider myself, again, British weather. That's what it looked like. And you can actually see here from a flight sim, that's actually a pretty darn good look of what it is. But one of the things I thought was so cool about Leeds Castle specifically, other than the fact that it's actually very nice in the inside, like the little gatehouse and everything, and this big old lake. Again, not very practical because if invaders want to drain your moat, they just have to put a hole right there. I'm going to disregard that because that problem comes up multiple times. Is the fact that it's very livable. It's comfortable. You could definitely see people living here. But the grounds here, let me give myself a little bit more power here. I'm getting a little slow. Are fairly large, and this is like a big park. It's not just like, some house in the middle of the woods, which, well, kind of it is. But this whole region here, basically there's like there's Labyrinth. I just flew over the top of the Labyrinth here. But there's lake, there's like a little restaurant where I got fish and chips. Fish and chips, by the way, on point. I do not like seafood. I do crab because I'm from Ireland, so obviously that you kind of have to. But I'm not a seafood person, but the fish and chips are right on, and the chips pretty good. The more like steak fries is kind of what we would call them in the United States. But again, I didn't encounter one that I didn't like. And of course, the other thing I encountered when I got sick of basically fish and chips the first time was something called mushy peas. And of course, I eat my veggies. I'm good for that. And mushy peas is exactly what it sounds like. It's literally peas that somebody mushed. I know that sounds obvious, but you don't know, you're new. But I tried that. No, my wife is not a big fan of that one. But like I said, I haven't met a veggie I don't like, kind of a thing like that. So we checked out Leeds. We got some lunch here at the little restaurant, which was pretty good. That's when I learned my next lesson about Europe, and that's the fact that if you want to order anything that's like, I'm going to get a lemonade, I got some bad news for you. It's going to have bubbles in it. Everything has bubbles in it. I'm going to get a water. It's got bubbles in it. It's just... folks who've been there are like, yeah, I know what you mean. People who live there are like, what do you mean there's no problem with that? It's just not what I'm used to. So it's kind of one of those things. I'm fine with it, but I never go out of my way to order it. So, of course, we did Leeds Castle, which I said, absolutely beautiful. You can see from the little photograph there that I took a second ago. It's just so cool. It's old houses and stuff like that. Not very defensible. I mean, this is clearly designed to be a residence. And that is something I learned, especially when we got to Wales a little bit later on. Again, looking straight down, we got another racetrack. These things just litter the countryside. Not a bad thing. Not a bad thing. So, of course, when we're done with all that, we got ourselves back into the car, the coach, rather. And again, for me, it's a bus, but everybody called it the coach. And I'm fine with it either way. It doesn't matter. And we drove all the way back to, basically, back to the ship in Dover. But for us, of course, we can't do that because we're not going to be landing on a boat or anything like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to head to a nearby grass runway. And we're going to settle this thing down because you can't end these videos, on a downer note. You got to land it. All right. Now, speaking of airplanes for a second here, this is a really cool plane, by the way. Like I said, as much as I trash it for not being high performance, it's great. Like, as you can see, the views on this thing are amazing. This aircraft was developed... Oh, how you doing? This aircraft was developed not too far from here, which is something that I like to talk about. One thing a tour guide was telling us is that in England, you're never more than 100 miles away from the ocean, which is just... Or the UK, I should say, not just England. But that was one of those things that I just found so incredibly interesting because, like where I live, obviously I'm within 50 miles of the ocean. Cool. But most of the United States is not within 50 miles or 100 miles or even 200 miles of the ocean. It's so big. And even though you're looking out the windows here and you can just get a size, just the scale, again, so much farmland here. Because, again, we're at the breadbaskets or the gardens, like I said, what they called it, it's just different, as far as that goes. You can always get to water. And here, like you see, it's all kind of broken down. Another thing you don't notice, and that I thought was kind of interesting, and now that I'm flying over it, I do notice there's not a whole lot of lakes. You definitely have streams, brooks, and things like that. But the lakes are when we get to Scotland. And I'll talk about those a lot. And we'll get to that in a moment. All right, let's get this thing down on the ground. So we're coming up on Headcorn here. This is going to be an interesting landing for us because it's grass. All right, no whammies, no whammies. We just got to get the thing safely down on the ground. Go next to assess my feet real quickly here. All right, there we go. Make sure everything looks good. And like I said, England was interesting. Dover was very pretty. We had a chance to do some shopping. The GBP, by the way, the Great Britain pound, that's a big, big unit. When you go to actually go back and let's go look at my credit card thing and you see how much stuff actually costs, you're like, oh God, how do you do it? One of the exercises I did afterwards, of course, is I was curious, if I'm a teacher, or how much money would I make or something like that? And, how much would it cost? And trying to work out the taxes and everything. I'm like, oh, golly, people, it's different. Discretionary income is a little different, like the safety net and stuff like that is definitely a little different. And I'm not going to get political here, but it's just interesting. Like I say, there's obviously benefits and downsides to both method. But one of the things I appreciate is that everybody here is taken care of. And that's, I don't know, maybe I'm getting political by saying something like that, but it's just kind of my take on it. I always have a tough time landing this thing. I never know how high I am. Hey, there we go. There we go. Not bad at all. By the way, in my journeys in England, actually pretty much all of the United Kingdom, I saw very little general aviation. As a matter of fact, I'd even go so far as to say I didn't see a single engine propeller plane the entire time I was in anywhere in the UK. It's definitely very expensive, especially knowing how expensive everything else is. And I imagine that if people are going to afford that, they're probably just going to do something else. All right, let's go pull off to the side here. So hopefully you enjoyed this. That was our part 2. Like I said, my first introduction. A very, very neat area. Got to go through kind of like the British little customs and everything. It didn't get a stamp for it. I was disappointed. Next time, of course, we're going to go to my next point on my journey, which will be Ireland. Hopefully we see you then. Enjoy.